And he said, let there be focus. And focus it was.
Yo, hvað er að frétta? My name is Arnaldur and today I'm going to show you the workflow I use to take a photo like this and turn it into something like this, but just spending, 15 minutes in Lightroom and, creating an Instagram banger. Alright, so welcome to Lightroom. This is the photo we are going to be working today. The subject, him right here, my man Oscar, is backlit by the sun, so he's very dark, but we are going to fix it, no problem. I'm going to take you through what I do in order to create, an Instagram banger. Alright, so the first thing I do is to go to the crop, right here, the crop overlay. You can also press R, boom, and you get up this here. Now I want the horizon to be straight, so I go here to angle, click this one, and we just drag it on like so. You can see you can drag this wherever, and where this lands, this is going to be the straight line. So we have it like this, boom, and now this is straight. If you want a full overview of this tool, I'll link it up here. But for now, let's continue. We also need to make a crop. So we go to 4:5. This is the Instagram crop. And let's just have it. If you press O, you can change where it is. So let's have it on this one. I want to narrow it down just a little bit and move it up to just right around here. I think it looks good. First thing I do is to open up the shadows because he's very, very, very dark. Let's just open up to 90. This looks good. We can maybe take it down to 80 to start with. And as you can see now, the highlights are really blown out. So we need to take those down. Let's take those down to 95 and up this again to 90. I think this is good. To compensate, I would go up a little bit with the whites. So basically I'm just compensating a little bit because we took down the highlight so much. And blacks, I would compensate for opening up the shadow so much. You can see that the black areas become very washed out. So we just place this down to 30. And that makes nice contrast here. So already, if you press Y on your keyboard, you can see before and after, we made a huge difference. And we're gonna make bigger difference too, okay? So leave this as is. We're gonna go to clarity in that a little bit later. And vibrance, saturation, leave that it is. And tone curves, leave that it is. We go to this later. Now, usually I start by going to HSL sliders right away. But lately I've been really liking to go first down here, all the way down to calibration. And there's a thing that I really like at the moment, and this changes all the time, but at the moment, most of my photos, I have -30 in blue, +20 in the hue on the red primary, and +7 here. And I think this makes a beautiful color. Now, it's a little bit too much at the moment, but bear with me, there's a bunch of things to do, okay? So once this is ready, we've established like a nice blue tone. You can see before and after, the blues become a little bit more blue, and the orange becomes a little bit more orange. We go back to the HSL color slider. These are perfect. Now, if you want an in-depth tutorial on the HSL slider, I'll link it up here, but I'm going to go through this a little bit quickly and talk while I'm doing so you know what I think, because that's what this video is kind of about. So in the yellow, I would drop the yellow to around 60. That takes away all the yellow that was. So you can see that this was very, very yellow. I don't really like that. So we drop it to 60. I would also change the hue, move it tiny bit more to the orange side. Maybe just around 15 would be cool. And then for the luminance, the brightness of the color, I would probably just take it down just a tiny, tiny, tiny bit. Okay. Now the greens, there's no real green here, so we can just leave it at -50, sorry. And aqua, here we have fun colors. So I like personally to take the aqua up pretty high to take away so it's not too teal. Okay, and I also like to take away most of the saturation on the aqua. I think that produces a beautiful blue color. And the luminance, let's also take that down like so. So we get a little bit more oomph in the sky, as you can see right there, okay? Then blues, I would like to take them down just a tiny bit, get a tiny bit more turquoise. And I also like to drop down the saturation here. Maybe not so much on this photo, like so. And to get back the blue, I would like to drop this down to around here. I think this produces, like, if you follow me on Instagram, you see that currently this is a vibe that I like a lot. Now for the purples, I would like to move them just a tiny bit up more to reds, take away just a tiny bit of the color here. And magenta, I don't think there's a lot of magenta in this photo. There's a little bit here in the sky. You see, if you watch the clouds, I think this is actually more beautiful to have the pretty high, produce a little bit reds here. And let me see if the luminance, and basically I'm always testing, like, what does each slider do? So luminance here, okay, luminance creates a little bit oomph in the clouds. You see that? So let's just produce a little bit oomph in the clouds. And let's see here. Okay, to compensate, let's have this up by 5. I think this is beautiful already. Why? Before and after, I mean, it's huge, but there are lots of more things to do, okay? Orange, I would like to drop down the orange just around 10, like so, and move this tiny bit up down towards the red. Luminance, I think luminance could we go up by 2, and here we can do this 9, move this red a little bit more to the orange side. Luminance as is on 10, but because we move this down to 10, let's up this by 10. So here, if we press on and off just on HCL slider, huge difference. I mean, this is so beautiful. Now we need to add a bunch of contrast, and I like to paint contrast a lot. You'll see everything that I do, okay? So look, here we are now in the tone curves, okay? So for the tone curves, I'm just gonna do a quick crash course on the tone curves. I'm gonna make a full video explaining everything. Once that is ready, I'll link it up here. But for now, if you don't know what it is,
basically you have here the whites, here you have the darks, and then in everything in between. Middle, you have the midtones, and here you have the shadows and highlights. If you can move this above this line that you see here, you make the image brighter, and if you move it down, you make it darker. The beautiful thing is that you can add nodes and isolate different parts. So you can isolate really just the midtones, mess just with the midtones and whatnot. If you double click on the nodes, boom, you reset.
Okay. So let's produce just a basic S curve with a little bit of modification. The midtones, I would like to take them down just slightly. And here I would like to drag this up like so. I think it's beautiful, but take the highlights a little bit down like so. I think somewhere around here, this is a nice place to start with. Okay. Now, contrast, we can add, just start with 10, just to get a little bit more oomph in it. And boom. Now what I do now, I established what are the points that I want to highlight. I really like to use the brushes, the radial filter and the gradient filter to narrow in on the subject. And here it's pretty clear that this is the subject, Oscar is the subject, and here is the leading line. So we start with the brush, and what I do, I brush the leading line here so we can have the flow a little bit more up. The brushes, this is the brush tool, you can brush whatever you like, and the down here you can mess with the size, the feather, and the flow, okay? So we have it like this, and we paint on, and if you press O on your keyboard, you can see what you're doing. So it produces this red thing, so you see what you do. And we just paint here. And as you can see here, I made a little mistake. I went too much, but that's no problem at all. If you hold in Alt on your keyboard or Option on a Mac, I've never used Mac, but I've heard it's like that. Then you get like a eraser tool and you can erase this. Very simple. So we erased our mistakes like so. A nice tip that when you're working like this, when you're punched in, if you hold in spacebar, you get this little hand, and now you can like move where you want on the photo like this. Now what I would like to do, I would like to drag up the clarity here. So I don't like to add clarity to the entire picture. I like to paint it on. I think that's a nice little thing you can do. So let's just add a bunch of clarity here. So this is okay, this is nice. I would add a tiny bit of texture too. And I really want this leading line to pop. So we can also do it a little bit brighter and then add a bunch of contrast to it too. Boom. And you can see that it really like enhances this leading line, making it, I like it a lot. Let's just take down the clarity like so. I think this is nice. Next thing is press enter, and we're gonna paint him because I want him to really pop. So we paint him, and here we are going to back up the exposure maybe to, I think this is pretty good. Take up the clarity on this one, boom, and add bunch of contrast like so, and maybe 5 here. And you know what, his jacket is blue and we took away a lot of the blue. Let's add a little bit in here in the saturation like so, and up the shadows just a bit, boom. Already I think it makes a huge difference. Then I would like to do a little bit on his face too. All right, so the next thing I would do is, you see these clouds here, I want to make them pop. So what I would do, I would take down the flow like to maybe 35. Flow makes so you don't put the entire effect on. So it's really nice to push down the flow, and then you can like paint on without adding the entire effect. So, and I would add like clarity 20 and dehaze maybe 10. And then I would just have feather all the way up, and we start to paint we don't have to have O on, just paint the clouds, making them pop just a little bit. This is very subtle, but you'll see in the end, it produces nice results, okay? Just like so. And before and after now, you can see that this is like, it's so good. Okay, so next is radial filter. What I would do with radial filter on this one is I would make a circle around him. Damn it, I should have already resetted this. If you leave it on, it's gonna be on everywhere. We reset it for the next one. I have to remember, always forget it. So here we make a little circle around him, press O. So it's like, let's have it very tight on him like so. And we drag down the exposure just a little bit, like just around 9, I think is good. Or you know what? I don't want to have it here. We go inward. If I want to drag it onto him, like make everything darker, and make like my own vignette, I would do it like this. But for this one, it's already pretty dark. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to up the exposure just a tiny bit, like so. So I'm inverted it. So now it's on him. So if you press O here, do you see? Now it's on him. So, and then what I want to do, I want to up the contrast just a little bit, maybe around 5-ish, and clarity around 2-ish, like so. I think this is good. And then radial filter. What I do now with the radial filter, I want to narrow in on him. So you can see that here is space that we don't really need, and here is space that we don't really need. So what I do, so now I'm going to remember to reset this, is I create my own type of vignette. So I'm going to do one here. And if you don't know what a gradient filter is, basically you're creating an effect. So let's say for exposure, if you take it all the way down, you see here that this is where it is, and that it gradually becomes less and less. And then you can place, you know, the effects that you want wherever you like. This is way too much, but if I just do it subtly, like so, I think this is beautiful. And then I would probably make another one here, like so, and just drag it just down just a tiny bit. And then I would do one more and have it like super, so it's very subtle. And like so. And I would actually add one more just to make a little bit oomph in the sky. So we do like this. And we take the clarity just a tiny bit and dehaze just a tiny bit. This is just a very subtle. But look, before it's like this, and after, boom, you've narrowed it down onto your subject, okay? All right, so we're almost finished now. There are a few more things I would like to do. Go down here. Clarity, recently, I really much like to drop it down. I think when you drop the clarity down, it creates a little bit of dreamy effect. But to compensate for that, I like to up the texture. So I'm dropping down the clarity and upping the texture. For saturation, I very much like to drop saturation down like this and up with the vibrance. This is just my point of preference. I think that creates like very beautiful photos. So we can up even the vibrance down a little bit more. Let's have minus, because I want this picture to be a little bit poppy with colors. So let's have that minus 10, just like so. Oof. Looks nice. Now, few more things. Go down to split toning. What I would like to do, so I would like to add a little bit of an orange teal into the highlights. So split toning, if you don't know what it is, it's basically you can add colors to either highlights and shadows, any color that you like. If you want, you can have blue in the highlights, or green if that's, you know, something that you like. I wouldn't, you know, we're not going to do that to an Instagram banger. But if you want to do art, you can do it like this. So I'm going to pick like, I think 42 is nice. So 42, and here you have the saturation, and we just drag it down. I just want this to be subtle. So right around 6. And to compensate, I would like to add a little bit of blue. So I know blue is around 215, but you can also click here and get the colors. So we have 215 and saturation. Let's see how much we can go. Ooh, I think this is nice because we took away a lot of the blue. I like to add it here in the shadows. So let's have it like at 9, and then balance, you're balancing out. So if you take it to the left, the shadows are more dominant, and here the highlights are more dominant. So I'm going to balance it out just tiny bit like this. This is very subtle, but if you take on and off, you see it adds tiny blue to the shadows. And I even want to up the highlights just a little bit like so, and drag this down. Like so. Now the last thing is a detail, and here's one more thing I also forgot. Lens correction, I usually do this in the beginning, I just forgot it now. But then you remove chromatic attenuation and I click enable profile correction. Sometimes I like it, sometimes I don't like it. And let me see, sharpness, I like to have them sharp, so around 80, but I like to have a mask. So if you hold in Alt, everything that is white is going to be affected by the sharpness, you see? And to compensate, I like to add up the noise reduction to 3. This looks good to me. Now, last thing is effect. I really much like vignette. I like that a lot. So let's drop that down to around 12. But I like to have the highlights. What you do here when you drag up the highlights, you let the highlights show through. So we drag that up to, I like to have it pretty high. And feather, we can feather it out to maybe around here. And grain, lately I've been liking to having this at like 20 and roughness at 35. Now I've gone through everything, and what I do now is I just take a final look. Okay, is there anything more I want to do? I would like for this one, I would personally like to up the contrast a bit, like so. I would probably go in with the brush here, and you see here is the highlights a little bit blown away out. I would drop down the highlights like this, and I would start to paint them back in. So we drop the highlights just a little bit. This is subtle, but I think it would be nice, like so. So we get a little bit detail back here. And then I might take a last look, you know, is the HSS slider, is there anything here I want to do? Maybe I want to have a little bit more color in the orange, like so. drop this down just a tiny bit, and yada, 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 yada. Just take, you know, final looks at the picture and what I can do to enhance it a little bit more, because there's always like something you can do, right? So once I'm happy, I'll export it and boom, now you're seeing the workflow that I use to produce, you know, Instagram bangers. The only thing I would do differently is that probably in the beginning, I usually do the lens correction there. But sometimes I forget and I do it afterward. That's no problem, okay? No big deal. Anyways, that's it for me today. If you could smack that like button for me, it would really help me out. Consider subscribing. I create lots of videos. And I could, no, did I say questions? If you have any questions, you know, you can feel free to ask in comments down below. I'll catch you guys in the next video. I'm out. Peace.